Make no mistake, Vladimir Putin is Russia, and Russia is Vladimir Putin. He holds as tight a grip on his country and its people as any dictator in the world. But for the first time in decades, there are cracks beginning to show in that relationship. And both Putin and his country are facing enormous challenges that must be terrifying to them. It's been 400 years since Shakespeare wrote, "Uneasy lies the head that wears the crown." In all that time, perhaps no leader has had a more uneasy head than Putin. He's known as an autocrat, an assassin, a kleptomaniac, and is now perilously close to facing an insurrection in his own country. He's done everything possible to silence criticism from within his own borders, from closing rival news media outlets and jailing opposition leaders to outright murdering unflattering journalists and even targeting expatriates abroad. He's had his tightly controlled Duma pass laws preventing free speech, even jailing those who dare call his invasion of Ukraine a war. But the continued failures of his armed forces have left him in the most precarious position of his 24-year rule. Due to his miscalculations about the speed with which he expected his invasion to succeed, his position offers few favorable outcomes. He's facing rising tensions at home, a brain drain of young skilled workers, 1 million of whom have already fled to other countries, and an army that can neither attack successfully nor defend continually, but seemingly only wants to attack civilian targets. And now the long-awaited Ukraine counteroffensive threatens to liberate what little of Ukraine Putin's army still occupies. 3 major attack vectors appear to be developing, one in the western Zaporizhia Oblast, one to the east in the western Donetsk Oblast, and another from around the destroyed city of Bakhmut. There are also continuing cross-border incursions into Russian territory near Belgorod, where Russian media bloggers have claimed entire regiments have been wiped out. Russia and Putin face innumerable challenges to their future and threats to their livelihood. And since Putin's been likened more than once to a Shakespearean villain, let's continue with that comparison. Truth is truth, to the end of reckoning. Putin has done his best, or his worst, to stifle dissent and to hide the truth from his people. But even he recently had to admit that the war he had planned with little input besides a few hand-picked yes-men is going poorly. Now that Russia's facing Ukraine's powerful counteroffensive that's been a half a year in the making, supplemented with more modern tanks and artillery systems, Putin's army is reeling under the multi-pronged offensives. Even Putin himself had to admit on June 9, 2023, "In recent days we have seen significant losses in Ukraine." Although that comment only barely scratches the surface of Russia's military woes, it's an extremely rare admission from a man who rarely admits mistakes. Despite suffering heavy losses in their initial assaults, Ukraine has continued making progress as they penetrate Russia's fortified defensive lines in the southeast of Ukraine. Notable successes have been made south of the Dnipro River, threatening the key transportation hub of Melitopol and the vital ports of Berdyansk and Mariupol. If these cities are to be retaken, Ukraine will be able to cut off support from Russia to more than a third of their forces occupying the southeastern portion of Ukraine and throughout Crimea. There are already reports of sabotaged train lines between Crimea and Melitopol, impacting Russia's ability to move supplies and reinforcements between the affected areas. These attacks are just a part of an increasing wave of sabotage across all of Russia and its occupied territories, with twice as many such attacks in the first 5 months of 2023 than in all of the previous year. If Ukraine can manage to take those 3 key cities, Melitopol, Berdyansk, and Mariupol, then the only supply corridor for the remaining Russian troops will be the already damaged Kerch Bridge from Russia to Crimea. The previous attack on that bridge, an attack whose source is still unconfirmed, has proved the bridge is vulnerable. In what must be for Putin an unsettling possibility, there is strong evidence that the explosion was caused by a truck bomb that originated from within Russia's own borders. If a future attack is able to completely destroy the Kerch Bridge, there will be no way out for tens of thousands of Russian troops, and equally as important for their heavy equipment, including hundreds of tanks, supply vehicles, and artillery systems. In addition to the spearheads driving south of the Dnipro, Russian forces have had to retreat from the northern and southern flanks near the city of Bakhmut, or what's left of that heavily destroyed town. As soon as the private military Wagner Group announced they'd captured the last of the city, they also announced they'd be pulling out of the front lines, most likely because of the staggering losses they'd incurred in the nearly 10 months of fighting. Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin made very public pronouncements that his forces would be turning the area's defense over to regular Russian forces. Within days of their departure, Ukrainian forces began systematic attacks on both the northern and southern areas surrounding the city, threatening to encircle the Russian forces trapped in between. One of the reasons for Ukraine's success is the increasing supplies of advanced US and European weapon systems that are being delivered. In the months leading up to the offensive, Ukraine has received much-needed deliveries of armored military vehicles, including German Leopard tanks and US-made Bradley infantry fighting vehicles. Many of these new systems come with enhanced night fighting capabilities, which Russian troops either don't have in sufficient numbers or are lacking altogether. These abilities have allowed Ukraine to perform a significant number of successful night assaults, which some Russian commentators have pointed to as a major reason for recent Ukrainian gains. Another source of Ukraine's dominance over Russia has been the delivery of US-made precision artillery, including HIMARS rocket artillery systems and the GPS-guided Excalibur shells, which provide Ukraine with the ability to target Russian ammo dumps, fuel production facilities, and command and control centers. Combined with Western long-range rockets like Britain's recently supplied Storm Shadow missiles, Russia suffered devastating attacks far behind the front lines. And if the U.S. Congress can convince President Biden to release the longer-ranged ATACMS, short for Army Tactical Missile Systems, Ukraine's reach will extend another 40 to 50 miles beyond the Storm Shadow's already lengthy 150-mile range. Meanwhile, Russia has run so low on ammunition that they've had to turn to countries like North Korea and Iran to buy artillery shells, even if they might be from stockpiles that are more than 40 years old. In recent tests by North Korea, more than a quarter of the shells they fired failed to detonate. Meanwhile, Iran is selling their less expensive drones to Russia, including the Shahed 129, the Shahed 191, and the Mohajer 6 models, which Russia has been firing at Ukrainian civilians. With such weaknesses in the military being exposed daily, Putin runs the risk of having his generals turn on him, or of his population rising up against him in anger at the staggering losses of dead and wounded from the past year of warfare. The frustration of such losses is becoming noticeable even in the normally tightly controlled Russian media. In time, we hate that which we often fear. The reaction to Russia's poor performance in the invasion has begun to surface even within Russia's closed ranks of politicians, all of whom owe their positions to Putin. On June 1, 2023, one of the more influential members of the Russian Duma publicly criticized the war in an international forum. Konstantin Zatulin, who is close to the top leaders in the Federal Security Service, Russia's intelligence agency known as the FSB, declared at a conference on the future of Ukraine that Russia had so far failed in all of its war aims, and that some of them had become, in his words, senseless. What were the aims announced at the beginning of the special military operation? Zatulin asked, using Putin's preferred term for the war. You all remember: denazification, demilitarization, neutrality for Ukraine, and the defense of the residents of Donetsk and Luhansk. On which of these points have we reached results today? Not one. One of the more outspoken critics of the Russian army and its geriatric leadership have been Wagner's boss, ex-chief and oligarch Prigozhin. As the financier behind the Wagner private military company, he's made himself visible on the front lines around Bakhmut and has been filmed repeatedly accompanied by his troops, who have lost as much as 80% of their members in the 10-month-long siege of the Ukrainian city. Still, Prigozhin finds time to film propaganda videos against what he calls the bunker grandpas back in Moscow. His anger was directed against those he saw as derelict in their positions of authority, specifically Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and the Chief of the General Staff Valery Gerasimov. Prigozhin's video on June 7, 2023 was perhaps the most blistering so far in the war. He predicted continual territorial losses to the advancing Ukrainian army, and when that happened, he forecast one of two possibilities: either there'd be executions of poorly performing Russian generals, or there'd be a popular revolt, by which he meant a civil war or a coup. Prigozhin could get away with such dire warnings because of the success the Wagner Group had in Ukraine. But now that the Wagner Group has been disbanded and Prigozhin has been sent into exile, Putin is left in an unenviable position. It's been said that Putin willingly allowed Prigozhin's tirades in part because they're seen as coming from a frontline commander and former war hero, while also allowing for criticism of Russia's military leadership. This took some of the pressure of the invasion's failures off of Putin, as the blame could be placed on others like Shoigu and Gerasimov. Always aware of any challenger to his iron control, Putin may have perceived these criticisms as a means to reduce the popularity of any leader near the top and limit challengers who might try to replace him. However, Putin faces far more challenges to his authority and even his freedom. There have been numerous allegations of the systematic abduction and forcible relocation of children from occupied regions of Ukraine, beginning even before the recent invasion was launched in February 2023. These alleged crimes have led to an arrest warrant being issued for Putin by the International Criminal Court in The Hague, Netherlands. This warrant means that he could be arrested in any country that honors the ICC's ruling. Even his trips to non-aligned countries are in jeopardy because of this arrest warrant. South Africa had planned to host a summit in August 2023 for a meeting of the BRICS Group, a loose alliance of Chinese-influenced countries, including Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa. There's been talk of a possible Putin arrest, though summit leaders deny that this would happen. Still, South Africa has recently considered not hosting the event after intense international pressure had been applied to arrest Putin if he attended. Those allegations of war crimes are just the tip of the iceberg for Putin. His army, which he controls directly through Defense Minister Shoigu and Chief of the General Staff Gerasimov, have been responsible for thousands of alleged acts of torture and murder throughout their brutal occupation of Ukraine. The town of Bucha, just outside of Kyiv, saw the execution of 300 civilians, with their hands tied behind their backs and left lying in the streets. Anywhere Ukraine has liberated their lands from Russian occupation, they've discovered torture chambers and mass graves of executed civilians. The US is currently hosting Ukrainian prosecutors, so they'll be better able to handle the investigation and punishment of such crimes. All of these war crimes can be laid at Putin's feet. He's been so supportive of such terror campaigns that he awarded medals to the unit that was responsible for the murders at Bucha. These crimes are in addition to causing what might turn out to be the worst ecological catastrophe that's hit Europe since the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, the blowing up of the Nova Kakhovka Dam. Putin admitted this was a barbaric act, as he called it, though he denied Russia was responsible for it. But the dam was clearly in Russia's sole control before and after the massive explosion that rocked the dam. Experts have determined that the breach was almost certainly caused by an internal explosion of hundreds of pounds of explosives. The dam was designed with a Soviet engineering plan to withstand a nuclear attack, so it is highly doubtful that any external threat like a missile could have done enough damage. Responsibility for the dam's destruction would most certainly be one more heinous crime attached to Putin's legacy. Russia has since destroyed other dams in occupied Ukrainian territory, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that they were behind the Nova Kakhovka Dam destruction as well. The greater implications behind the dam's destruction suggest things are getting even worse for Putin in this reckless war, and he already knows it. More than 80% of occupied Crimea's drinking and agricultural water came directly from the lake that the dam controlled via a lengthy canal. Destroying the dam signals that Putin's aware he is likely to lose control over Crimea, and that he's willing to destroy it so that Ukraine cannot have it. Estimates are that it could be more than a decade before such levels of fresh water can be returned to the peninsula. Military failures, political threats from rivals, and potential war crimes are still only a portion of what Putin and Russia are facing. There's also the incalculable damage he's done to his country's economy, as well as its standing in the eyes of the rest of the world. There is thy gold, worse poison to men's souls. As bad as the Russian military is failing in Ukraine, Russia's economy is faring even worse. Russia's been one of the world's top 3 oil producers and exporters for much of the past 2 decades, following only the US and Saudi Arabia. But the stiff sanctions and price caps imposed by Europe and the US following Russia's invasion have hit this part of their economy, once their most reliable money-making segment, especially hard. Russia has offered a $20 a barrel discount in the cost of its crude oil exports, hoping to draw in new buyers, primarily India and China, to replace the EU members that have refrained for the most part from buying Russian oil and gas. But that discount and Russia's inability to sell as much as it did before the invasion means a shortfall of almost $65 billion a year. That's in addition to the drop in sales and the lower price of oil per barrel than Putin was counting on when the invasion began. Total all those deductions, and Russia might be witnessing a decline of their total oil and gas revenue in 2023 of an astounding $180 billion. The expense of the Ukraine invasion is now hitting their economy directly as well. Putin's had an unusual tax slapped on Russian businesses, demanding a 5% tithe from their excess profits to fund the war. Although who determines what an excess profit has been is not accurately spelled out. Another area where Russia's economy is reeling is in its military sales. As recently as 2011, Russia was on an almost equal basis with the US in terms of military equipment sales. Russia's exports have been sliding since then, but while it might have been suffering, the invasion seems to have hammered the final nail into that coffin. Part of that is due to the poor performance of Russian tanks and airplanes. Russia's once vaunted main battle tank line from the T-72 through the T-80 and T-90 were all designed to be low to the ground, thus making them harder to hit. One design element necessary to accomplish this was the use of an autoloader, which loads the tank's main gun with an automated system that pulls shells from a circular tray at the bottom of the tank turret. But this system has been shown to be highly dangerous, as any penetration of that turret from above can easily ignite the large number of shells on the floor of the turret. Hundreds of Russian tanks have been filmed with their turrets blown completely off from such a resultant fire and explosion. This has helped lead to a massive drop-off in overseas buyers, and without overseas buyers, the Russian military won't be able to afford to build more of the advanced tanks on their own. The economic sanctions have also resulted in a massive lack of advanced computer chips. This has severely affected many areas of Russian production, and again, one of the areas hardest hit has been Russia's military. Without advanced computer chips, Russia can't produce its most modern tank, the T-14 Armata, nor can it manufacture as many rockets and missiles as it's been firing. Russia's been caught using stolen Swedish traffic cameras in some of their drones, along with computer chips from washing machines that they were buying in record numbers before sanctions were placed on their import. Perhaps most importantly, the decline in arms sales signals Moscow's increasing dependence on China and India. Russia is now more dependent on arms sales to those two nations than at any time since 2003, but with much smaller export numbers. All the while, both China and India continue to develop their own arms industries that they export in direct competition with Russia. Some of those military exports from China have been a direct result of back-engineering technology Russia originally sold them, including Russia's S-300 surface-to-air missile system and China's version of the Su-27. What's even more worrisome for Russia are the reports from Ukraine that Chinese components are being seen in increasing numbers in destroyed or captured Russian weapons, from tank targeting systems to drone and missile guidance systems. These developments suggest Russia is now reliant on China's military aid, a reverse of their former position. Heat not a furnace for your foe so hot that it doth singe yourself. It's clear now that Putin made the greatest mistake of his political career when he decided to invade Ukraine. Everything that's happened since then has negatively affected Russia. His war of conquest has instead turned into a series of self-inflicted wounds that have driven Russia to its lowest point politically, economically, and internationally since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. His military belligerence has pushed countries like Sweden and Finland to seek NATO membership, the exact opposite of one of his pre-invasion goals, which was to prevent NATO from further eastward expansion. His once vaunted military, thought to have been the second strongest in the world behind only the US, is now being clowned on by the likes of US Secretary of State Antony Blinken as the second strongest in Ukraine. Putin is single-handedly responsible for weaning the EU off of Russian oil and gas imports, which in turn has greatly reduced Russia's export market. The same can be said for their military export market. One of the few cards Putin has remaining to play is his continued threat of nuclear blackmail, which has drawn loud rebukes from all circles, including even from his supposed ally, China. After their inevitable defeat and withdrawal from Ukraine and Crimea, what does Russia have to look forward to? A declining birth rate, exacerbated by the loss of more than 200,000 Russian casualties, and another 1 million young people who have fled the country. An economy that's in shambles and facing more trouble in the future if they're forced to pay reparations for the destruction they've caused in Ukraine. They must also face the possibility, as Prigozhin has predicted, of a possible revolution or civil war, which could bring even more violence and economic upheaval. There are already foreign units attacking Russia in Belgorod. How long will it be before China decides it wants to retake Vladivostok, which as recently as 1860 was a Chinese territory known as Hai Shenwai? There have already been semi-official pronouncements by state-approved media in China that the city and the region surrounding it should be returned to Chinese control. The recent cross-border raids and the drone strikes against Moscow show that all of Western Russia is vulnerable. Infighting among battlefield leaders, continued sabotage, and a spate of mysterious fires, coupled with these unprecedented incursions by paramilitary groups into Russian regions bordering Ukraine, are raising questions over whether Putin has lost control of the situation. Many world leaders are calling for peace and an end to hostilities. Only two things need to happen to ensure such a peace. All of Russia's troops need to leave occupied Ukraine, and Putin needs to step down or be forcibly removed from office. Now go check out why Putin is scared to deploy the Su-57 to Ukraine, or click this other video instead.